CABAH, which is an easy way of saying the ARC Centre of Excellence for Australian Biodiversity and Heritage, which is a bit of a mouthful, was designed to tell a globally significant, culturally inclusive history of Australia. CABAH's objective was to try and investigate that huge scope of human history, and even extending before people arrived on the continent back to 130,000 years ago. In telling that history, the objective of CABAH was to partner with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to conduct research on country and in laboratories to tell that history.
We have a wonderful Indigenous history that goes back at least 65,000 years, and CABAH is really trying to bring out that great story. And it's doing it by working very closely with First Nations communities right around Australia. Australia has always been part of a bigger world, and trying to look at those sort of connections in the past and how those connections have also shaped First Nations society is a critical part of what we do. And what we've discovered is that the type of results that you get when you do work collaboratively with First Nations communities is that the scientific product is actually much better.
Now, certainly being part of the Centre of Excellence gives you access to other researchers that you may not normally come across in your discipline. So coming out of an Indigenous studies background with archaeology, I've been able to collaborate with researchers in that sense, but being able to link in with coastal geomorphologists and people who do predictive modelling, people in the sciences, of course. That whole interdisciplinary work has been so important in terms of building my own research capacity. So, building those networks has been the really fundamental step for me, getting to know who's who in these disciplines, and the work that they do as well, and how that can contribute to something like telling the story of the past.
So, in the truest nature of a Centre of Excellence, being such a multidisciplinary group of people that had extremely different backgrounds, but as well as different goals, but all sort of under the larger envelope of trying to characterize and quantify how the environment and the people interacted and changed each other since people first arrived, and even how they arrived in Australia. So obviously going back tens of thousands of years and examining that sort of complex relationship and how it cascaded through everything into plants, animals, and fire patterns. And so we're really trying to get a better handle on how the landscape and people have changed in the amazingly long period of time that people have been in Australia.
CABAH was funded in 2017 through our most prestigious program. The Centres of Excellence are highly sought after arrangements. CABAH received just under $34 million as a result of that, but it also has brought 20 partner organisations with it in undertaking the research that it's been doing, whether it be universities, museums, archaeological service providers, and over the 6 years it's been operating to date, it's achieved some amazing outcomes.
So one of the defining features of CABAH is working in partnership with traditional owner communities across the continent and developing new ways of working that are respectful of different ways of viewing the world and different ways of knowing the world.
In developing a collaborative research partnership with Indigenous communities, it takes time. And one of the key things is that as outside researchers coming into communities, you have to sort of demonstrate that one, you're actually, demonstrate to the communities that you're worthy to work on their heritage and their country, but that you're also going to produce results that resonate with communities, and not just with the senior people in communities, but all at different levels of the community, right down to the kids as well.
You want to bring that kind of quantified scientific basis for a lot of what is well known amongst Indigenous people already and their connection to country. We can show that quantitatively. So it kind of brings together people from very opposite perspectives. At least that's the intention. And I think the training component of that is also training Indigenous people, but it's also training non-Indigenous people to see the other perspective and to work together, trying to reestablish that not only Indigenous perspective, but that Indigenous capacity in its own right.
And centres of excellence like CABAH are leading the way in developing new ways of working and setting examples of what can be done in partnership with Indigenous communities. And I think what we're all trying to achieve ultimately is an authentic co-design process where a researcher doesn't come to a community with a question, but the question is developed as part of a co-design process with traditional owners, so that the very research questions themselves are being defined as relevant to the aspirations of communities.
It's about developing a process from the start of the research, and even developing the research questions right through to how the research will be done, how the results will be interpreted in a culturally meaningful way, but also just making sure that the final product tells a good story about their country, and that it's of benefit to not just their own communities, but to neighbouring communities and to the Australian society as well. And I think that's one of the great things of working in collaboration with communities, is you get to see First Nations Australians in a very different light, in a much greater understanding.
The group from CABAH were very like-minded with me in terms of being researchers who were seeing stories and phenomena and understanding, amazing stories that were coming out of our research, and really appreciating the fact that there needed to be a broader audience for them. So I think, in relation to doing a series as bold and as big as the First Inventors, it was really important to have a research partner with the expertise, the depth and breadth that CABAH covers.
The whole premise of the First Inventors was a very ethically oriented approach to the production. And the idea of the series was not only to be authentic to Indigenous voice and foreground Indigenous voice, but have rigorous scientific underpinnings to what was being told. And those scientific underpinnings were based in both Western science and Indigenous knowledges and sciences.
This series is going to give a great springboard, I think, to the work that a lot of researchers in CABAH, will continue. And I think we're giving a glimpse into the kind of work that researchers from CABAH can do, and hopefully people will be more excited and hungry for what's been really clever about this series, and what Larissa, Bert and the whole team of people have done here, in really clever ways, been able to put together all these different stories, and then get that out there to the public in a way in which, is, I guess, transforming people's minds about, Indigenous people in the past. So, it's kind of bringing that past and Indigenous people's resilience into the home of all Australians, which I think is a great way to move forward in this country.
One of the things I really admire about the team in CABAH, which is why I was so keen to partner with them as the research partners for the series, is that they have a really good understanding of the importance of academic outputs, or outputs from research that go beyond just academic articles and materials that are going to be used by other academics. And part of the collaborative approach that they take with communities means that inevitably, because of that approach, the outcomes of their research are going to have meaning and impact and be in furtherance of the aspirations of those First Nations communities.
Many of the stories reflect research that CABAH has led or been involved in. And it kind of was a natural synergy that CABAH was very committed not only to ethically grounded research in the space that the First Inventors was pitched in, But CABAH was very committed to getting its message out in the education and engagement space. So there was a really good synergy between the objectives of what the First Inventors wanted to achieve and what CABAH's broad mandate was.
That is what the entire First Inventors series is about. It's about translating these different knowledges, both the Western sort of scientific knowledge and Indigenous knowledges, into a format that the broader Australian public can sort of digest and understand, but also just get quite enthused by it. Hopefully it will help the average Australian get a better appreciation of the extraordinary knowledge that First Nations communities have, and that if we listen to that knowledge, then Australia will be a better place. It will be a better society, but also our landscape and our continent will be looked after in a much more sort of responsible and respectful and sustainable way.
They understood the advantage of being able to disseminate that information and those research findings to that broader audience. And I think importantly, what was part of their thinking about why that was an important thing to do was they're very aware that the work that they do gives them, as non-Indigenous people primarily, an insight into First Nations culture and knowledge that has transformed the way they think about First Nations people on this country.
Research is important, not only from the perspective of discovering new things, but it's really important that the translation of that research actually improves the lives of our community as well. So it is to the benefit of Australia in actually funding that research, and it's great to see that the centre is actually using really innovative approaches in relation to that translation, such as the First Inventors program, through which it's actually relaying what it has learnt to the community more broadly.
You know, people are taking it seriously. I'm glad that the project was taken up, and yeah, that CABAH's had such a vital role to play, because CABAH was kind of instrumental to making sure that these stories got out there as well. So, yeah, no, I think it's excellent. I'm already hearing young people talk about it, and it's already had an impact as far as I'm concerned.
We really couldn't have done this in any other capacity than a Centre of Excellence, because these complex systems models are complex because they have so many moving parts. And so we had to get all these experts together to be able to make the best components, or the cogs that would then feed into the model. My job was to sort of glue all that together mathematically. But so we could not only not have done this, we couldn't even have conceived of how to do it had we not been together in a centre with a common goal. But the Centre of Excellence really was this crucible that put all of this very different expertise, and sometimes we didn't even speak the same language, and we had to figure out how to communicate. And that sort of organic bubbling produced these amazing outputs that none of us could have done by ourselves.
I think it was very helpful to be able to have a research partnership that wasn't so singular, but was multifaceted, multidisciplined, and where you had people, because of the nature of this Centre of Excellence, could see how their own slice of research fitted into a broader narrative.
So one of the things that CABAH has done so well is actually taken a multidisciplinary approach to its research. To maximise the benefit from what we're learning, it's important that they actually use researchers with a range of disciplines. In CABAH's case, they've actually used people from earth sciences, ecology, genetics, archaeology and Indigenous studies, bringing together the range of not only those great minds, but that range of disciplines has allowed them to achieve even higher levels of research quality.
So CABAH has really been fundamental for my research as an early career researcher, in particular, accessing different researchers and mentorship over the years. That's helped progress my career in terms of looking back at my work that I did for my PhD, and publishing out of that. So it's kind of given me an opportunity to explore my research a little bit more.
And one of the things I'm most, I guess, proud about in terms of CABAH's lasting footprint is its research training and ethics program. So through that research training and ethics program, or we call it RT&E, we've been able to offer extraordinary professional development opportunities to members of the centre, extending from early career researchers and PhD candidates right the way through to senior chief investigators. And those research training and ethics activities have included working on country masterclasses, where centre members have been invited to be guests of traditional owners on country to learn about the history and priorities of country, but really importantly, learn about appropriate ways of working authentically and respectfully with Indigenous communities. And I think those activities are part of the core legacy of CABAH as a centre of excellence in terms of training future generations and a future workforce that is trained to work appropriately and respectfully with Indigenous custodians.
I wanted to show First Nations people how being a researcher can actually be something that allows us to work for our community around our community's priorities. I hope we'll have many messages for both First Nations and non-Indigenous Australians in terms of thinking about how they might be interested in coming into these kinds of professions, working in these areas, and actually, doing this collaborative work on country, and seeing through some of these stories that the rewards of this research can be phenomenal and so much more than what you get within the just within the narrow academic community.
That's one of the things we hope to do, is to bring on board more Indigenous people who want to take a career in research. Really, we need to just be opening it up more and asking the questions about, do you want a career in research? And that might be the way to try and get more people involved and kind of let that just evolve as people share their interests and their knowledge and their own experiences of being Aboriginal